the ZIS-154, the ZIS-155, both post-war Soviet buses, but being copies of GM old looks, they were not all that original. Then the mold was finally broken, and the USSR now had a bus they could call their own. This is the story of the ZIL-158, the Soviet bus that finally broke the mold. Hi, this is Jeffrey. Now, in a couple of my previous videos, we took a look at some post-war Soviet transit buses, such as the ZIS-154 and the ZIS-155, both of which exhibited styling that was very similar to the American GM old-look bus. However, by the late 1950s, the Soviets were looking to replace the ZIS-155 with a new bus that was longer and more powerful. And so they developed the ZIL-158. Now at first, the ZIL-158 looked very much like an American old-look bus. However, they restyled it and it became a bus all their own. It's a really interesting story, so let's get started in learning about the ZIL-158 Soviet transit bus. From the mid-1940s to the late 1950s, Soviet transit buses were, at least aesthetically, based upon the American GM old-look bus. First, there was the ZIS-154, and then its simpler and shorter successor, the ZIS-155. As newer, more up-to-date buses were required, and as development resources in the USSR were somewhat limited, the successor to the 155 was basically going to be an updated and modernized version of it. The main goals for this new bus was for it to be longer, have a greater seating capacity, a more powerful engine, and a more modern appearance. Interestingly, the last goal mentioned almost did not happen. At least, not at first. In May of 1956, the first prototype of the new ZIL-158 was outshopped from the Lykachev plant in Moscow. However, the bus was very similar to its predecessor, and, with the exception of the size of the side windows, it still looked almost like a GM old look. A second prototype in August of that year also had the same effect. But finally, it was the third prototype, also introduced in August of 1956, that would set the standard for the ZIL-158. The first serial production version of the bus, known as the 158A, a tourist bus, made its debut in May of 1957, and a total of 272 were built. It featured observation windows running along the side of the roof and had 36 seats. In August of 1957, the next major iteration of the bus was introduced. A city bus with a monocoque body, its engine was located in front on the right, and the brake, drive, and door opening mechanisms were pneumatic. The bus was mass-produced from August of 1957 to April of 1960 at the ZIL plant, and from July of 1959 to 1961 at the Luckino or Liaz plant. This change was due to trucks being a priority at the Lykachev ZIL plant. A total of 9,515 were built in its first year of production, including 180 units for the 6th World Youth Congress in 1957. A modernized version of the bus, the ZIL-158V, was placed into production in 1961. The main changes were the use of a single-disc clutch, a gearbox taken from the ZIL-164A truck, and a modified brake system. In Moscow, the ZIL-158 and 158V dominated bus fleets, with 1,900 of these types operating on 114 routes, and the last vehicles were removed from service in 1978. And many other Soviet cities also operated the Type 158. Now, let's take a look at some of the basic specifications of the ZIL-158. Number 1, length is 9.03 meters. Number 2, width is 2.5 meters. Number 3, height is 3 meters. Number 4, empty weight is 6,500 kilograms with a total permissible weight of 10,840 kilograms. Number 5, passenger capacity is about 32 seated and 28 standees. Number 6, engine is the ZIL-158 of 110 horsepower and similar to ZIL trucks of the era. And finally, number 7, top speed is 65 kilometers per hour. In addition to the ZIL-158, 158A, and 158V, there were a number of one-off variations of the bus that did not go into production. In 1959, the ZIL-158D was built, which was a city bus with a modified front end and 2x1 seating. At the end of 1960, the Liaz plant manufactured a prototype Liaz E676 bus, in which they tried to correct the shortcomings of the serial Z-158. And according to Boris Kartovsky, an engineer at ZIL on this prototype,
the production ZIL-158 suffered from various deficiencies, which were narrow doorways, a narrow passageway, and insufficient body strength. To address this, we installed double service doors by extending the rear overhang of the body by 1 section length, and the seating layout of the cabin was changed from 2x2 to 2x1, and instead of a conductor, 2 fare boxes were installed. Additionally, the body was structurally strengthened to a great degree.
Also in 1960, the PTS-Z3, a mass media version, was built for radio and television production. And in 1961, a more modified version of the Liaz E676 was produced with an even more unique and bulbous-looking front end. An ambulance version of the early ZIL-158 was also built, but of only 2 copies. Similar to other Soviet buses, a trailer version was also produced in the late 1950s, consisting of a ZIL-158 bus as a tractor and a 2PN-4 type trailer built by Aremcuz. In total, there were 7 versions of the ZIL-158, but most were prototypes. A grand total of about 62,350 buses of this type were built until 1969, and then being replaced by the Liaz 677. And so, with the Type 154, 155, and 158, the end arrived for one of the greatest bus trilogies in history, not only in the Soviet Union, but pretty much anywhere on Earth. And so there it is, the story of the ZIL-158, the Soviet bus that finally broke the GM-style mold. And it was also the last bus of the 150 series trilogy. And with over 62,000 built, quite an achievement. So, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this look at the ZIL-158. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. Bye.